There you go.
There we go. We got you. Okay, Ashton, how you doing?
Hey, sir, how's it going?
Glad to have you. So what's your time frame? You were saying 2:30 to 3, and we're getting real close to 3 already.
Oh, well, I don't mind speaking for a good 15 or 30 minutes.
Okay.
I'm free.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. Sounds good. I'm just going to turn this volume up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so it's myself. I don't know if you'd seen too many of the shows. You could just see me through the little camera here, but you're actually projected on a big monitor. So we see, so if I'm looking at the monitor, it doesn't look like I'm looking at you. It's because I'm just looking at the monitor here. I also got a co-host here, Ryan.
What's going on, buddy?
All right. How's it going, Ryan?
Good, man, good.
So how you doing, Ashton? Feeling good?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm just here at school right now.
Is that right? What are you going to school for?
I go to the University of Texas in San Antonio. I'm a psychology major.
Oh, gotcha. How long? So, real quick, a little background. Most of the people seeing your big win, 20 years old, a huge win at the USAPL 93 kilo class. To win that title, you had to upset a reigning IPF World Champion in LS McLain.
Yes.
Can you bring us back to, for some people like myself, that's a huge win, especially at 20 years old. When did you start powerlifting? Because it felt like, holy smokes, where did this guy Ashton come out of? Came out of nowhere. You're super young to be winning.
Yes. Well, I started powerlifting around 15 years old, and I started lifting weights at 13 years old.
So even though you're 20 years old, you're already basically a veteran.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I'm working on it.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been powerlifting for 5 years old, leading into the USAPL Nationals. So how many competitions have you done? Have you done the previous year's Nationals?
I did do 2016 Nationals. Yes, sir.
And what rank did
I
you?
placed third. I was in the same class. I believe I placed third or fourth. I'm not sure, but I was also the lighter body weight.
Ah, gotcha. So going into this, did you expect to be battling it out with LS, the reigning IPF World Champion LS McLain, and pulling for a possible gold medal?
Yes, I did anticipate it. I did a lot of number crunching and just kind of strategically placed a lot of the attempts. Most of the attempts that I made at Nationals were premeditated. So I did anticipate a top 2 finish if I hit at least 7 to 9 attempts.
Yeah. And was the pressure walking into that final deadlift with the pressure on, knowing you're pulling for the win, and not just the win and a gold medal at the USAPL Raw Nationals, and that's a huge, heavily hype. After the IPF World Championships, that's probably the biggest.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, we're all Canadian, and we all watched it. Like everyone all over the world watches the Raw Nationals. So what was the pressure like, knowing you were pulling for the win and pulling to beat LS McLain of all people?
Well, all that was going through my head at that moment was I would not fail. And that was pretty much it.
Yeah. Who handles you when you go to competitions?
It just depends. At that competition, my training partner, Christian, he handled me. He's a 105 lifter.
Mm-hmm.
And we essentially set up most of the attempts before Raw Nationals. I also work closely with Gene Bell. I would consider him a mentor of sorts. He's definitely, he's also been a great coach to me in the past few years and taught me most of what I know about training and helped me shape a lot of my philosophies on that.
Let's get into some of that training. So how often, what does some of your training blocks look like? How often do you do like dead squats, bench in terms of your splits? And do you split it up in terms of blocks of volume, then taper it?
Well, my training is usually actually very simple. What I do is I'll usually make anywhere between 8 and 16-week programs. I usually don't make plans shorter than that unless I'm competing at a short notice.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's usually at a minimum of 8 weeks in length, which is usually probably about what I usually train around. Essentially, what I do is I start with kind of a conditioning phase, really. where I just do a lot of hypertrophy, like 6 sets of 6, 5 sets of 5, 4 sets of 8, and I do that for the first 4 weeks, and then that middle section is the strength training portion, sort of, and it's kind of like the transition and the bridge between that high volume and that heavy lifting, and I usually then transition into the end, the last 2-3 weeks of the 8-week plan. And that's the heavy lifting, the doubles and triples, and then once that's complete, this meet actually I experimented with something new. I thought about doing one time of the week for 2 weeks. I would just work up to my openers, all 3 the same day, kind of simulated meet conditions.
Ah, no shit, yeah.
And I would run through it in about 2.5 hours. I would try to do it very fast because I know that World Nationals, I know that prime time, the rosters are limited and small, so it was going to be a fast-paced meet. So I had anticipated that pace, and it didn't throw me off when I got there.
So would that be, in terms of the way you set it up, and you're doing your 8s and triples, etc., do you do like an RPE rating in terms like, well, this is about the type of effort I want to apply, or do you do like a percentage base, or how do you pick the numbers you're going to use?
Okay, good question. Well, sir, most of the time I will just use the templates that I make and the plans that I make are percent based, yes. So primarily I will go off of that, and most of the time I will use the weight on those sheets. Most days for most people are average. Just off average. Most people are average. And if you're not average, you're going to have average days. Relative to others, it may be magnificent or amazing, but to yourself, it's average. So I have lots of mostly average days. I'll use that percentage, and it's usually right in the ballpark. But on days where I feel really good or really bad, then that's when I decide to gauge the RPE a bit more for that day in particular, and I will either add weight or drop weight.
Gotcha. And
so it's a mixture of both. It's strongly percentage based, but I will use RPE, especially on days where I feel off or where I feel extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of more and more you see that where people will have like kind of an RPE, but they have a number down as like an anchor. And that number kind of like, it'll sway back or a little heavier depending on how you feel. The big thing with having that anchor is making sure you know yourself so you don't burn out and start frying the nervous system. And you coach people, I know, coaching an athlete, and when they're just feeling like, everything starts turning into RPE 10, everything starts being a little too heavy and they start burning out, get a little too much gumption in them, especially if they're like training, peaking for a meet. That's probably the hardest, is making sure they don't peak in the gym.
Oh, absolutely. That's very important. And I think that's when the use of the RPE system, me personally, I believe that's when it's most useful in training, is those days where you do feel like that. That way you know to lower the weight, to go easier, to maybe even take a week off and rest. I've done that before, where if I feel really fried on the lift, I'll say, okay, next week I'm not doing deadlifts. I won't deadlift for a week or two, but I'll continue to squat and bench press and, continue on about my life. And then I will resume and pick up from there. Maybe even adjust the plan a little bit. I'm flexible. I pride myself in being able to, shift fire if need be, if the need arises.
And a lot of people, they get rattled to make those kind of decisions. Like I trained some people, and if I ever took deadlifts out for a week or switch some things up, they'll think, oh shit, what does that mean? Is there something wrong? What's going on? And they get a little too rattled, or they think, okay, now I'm off. Or if we throw in a deload, you know what? You've been training hard, you're starting to get a little stagnant, maybe come back down, throw in an audible and say, look, we're gonna deload you. Some people get rattled putting in these new deloads and stuff, right? But you're one of the advocates of you gotta be flexible.
Yes, you do need to be flexible. That's absolutely important. I don't think being particularly rigid is an effective way of training, because let's take a meet, for instance. If you consider it a training session, or if you consider it a competition or whatever else, it is technically competition, but people mentally view that differently. But what I think is important is being flexible in training helps you be flexible in that environment. If you're rigid in your set and then you miss an attempt or you get a red light that you think you shouldn't have gotten, and your game off, then I think that the way that you mentally approach a meet is quite often how you mentally approach your training. And I think being rigid is not necessarily always going to yield the best results. I think, yeah, people get rattled up and people think, oh, well, I feel fine. I mean, I should be able to just keep lifting heavy and keep going up and up and up, but they don't realize that, there comes a point where, yes, that progress will halt for a bit, or it may even go down a bit. And yeah, there are times where it's necessary to deload, even if you feel great sometimes. Sometimes it is necessary to deload. And sometimes it's the complete opposite. Sometimes you don't feel too well, but you put on the weight that the percentage asks for and you do it just fine. It's just really knowing yourself, knowing your coach or your mentor and really trusting them and helping you. If I'm planning to pull, 600 for triples that day, and Gene Bell comes in and says, "No, man, you're going to be competing at the Nationals or whatever. Do a modified deload, go about 65% for those triples instead of 600 pounds. You're using like 400 pounds." So I'm just like, Roger up, 405 pounds for triples.
It is what it is. Yeah, exactly. You know what? I like what you said about being flexible, because you really do. You're not just training your body, but you are training your mind too, conditioning where if something in training rattles you so badly, or if something doesn't go wrong, like we know when you compete in a meet, it very rarely goes right to the book. A cut can be super tougher than you thought, or the bar, if it's a little heavier, you got to shake things up. You're like, okay, you take what's there for that day. You eat whatever food's available that day, right? So I guess, in terms of the training, you got to be flexible so it leads into the competition. You have the same mindset. Because when that day of, if you're not flexible, you're cooked. That's how guys end up bombing out, right? Now, do you do much work in terms of partials?
I'm sorry, sir, one more time?
Do you do much work in terms of partials? Doing like pulling from blocks, bench pressing the boards and stuff like that?
Okay, partials, yes. Well, actually, I do a bit of it. Not a huge or significant amount. I don't primarily base my training around it very much, but I do like to utilize that as an auxiliary, especially to work on weaknesses in particular. If you're bad, certain parts of the deadlift, maybe I would recommend doing rack pulls, or maybe recommend doing deficit deadlifts. I mean, I think those lifts have their time and place, but I think sometimes some people will become a little too fixated on progressing on those lifts because they do a little more or a little less weight on it than their normal, the normal variation of the lift, which is normal,
Mm-hmm.
But they get caught up on trying to progress in those lifts too much, and sometimes people may forget the main focus. But I do think that, yes, those lifts are helpful, and I do use them. I'll use them maybe. Those are the only lifts where I won't necessarily program it for 8 weeks. If I have 8 week program, for instance, and I'm doing pin press, for bench press, maybe I'll do that the first 4 weeks, or I'll do it 2 weeks, and then the other 2 weeks I'll do maybe an isometric variation of bench press, and then switch off every 2 weeks, or the first 4 weeks do one variation, the first 4 weeks do the other variation. Just kind of to work through weaknesses and to work on all the spots of the lift. Is
there a point in your training that you cut those out and you just do full on competition style lifts, or will you do those variations right up to the meet?
Absolutely. I usually will cut all those out about 3 weeks out, 3 to 4 weeks out from the meet, and I just solely put every ounce of focus into. Every ounce of focus into those 3 lifts, perfecting those lifts, squatting to depth, best I can. Pulling, locking out, making sure the knees are locked, no soft knees. Bench press, making sure I'm fully locked out. Top sets, listen to commands.
And do you do stuff like, in terms of variations, like front squats, or do you pause at the knees for deadlifts and introduce those kind of things into your work and some of your clients as well?
Not particularly very often. There's a lot of bugs over here.
It's all good.
Not particularly often, actually, surprisingly. A lot of people do use a lot of those variations, and they do work for some people, but for myself personally, I usually find that just sticking with the actual lift itself and doing little variation or just using it as an auxiliary is honestly the best way to go about it. I mean, unless the exception I can see, there's almost always exceptions. The exception I can see is that you're perhaps injured or hurt, and you need to do that variation because maybe the full squat will hurt you, or it'll further hinder your ability to squat in the future, or perhaps you have some other injury related to the lift and some portion of the lift you can't complete, then I think, yeah, you could focus on a different part of that lift and just not doing it at all. But usually, as far as program goes, I usually stick to the main lifts mostly, and the auxiliaries I usually use just for extra conditioning, or just to strengthen the weak parts of the lifts, or just to strengthen, honestly, the secondary muscles, the other muscle groups, improve a lot of the muscle groups, because I am also big on building muscle, building muscular strength, building muscular endurance. That's why at the beginning I use that conditioning phase to try to build muscle, and not only build muscle, but also condition yourself to be able to handle, your body, let your body adapt to handling a certain load or weight for a certain extended period of time. That way, you're squatting heavier, and when doubles and triples, become second nature.
How often do you get into like doubles and triples? In terms of your all year round, are you mostly within that volume phases?
I personally like doubles and triples a lot. I get into them quite a bit, especially when I'm competing. About 4 weeks after the meet, it'll usually be triples and doubles. I never really do singles in training very often. Again, those phenomenal days, every once in a while you feel great, or you're testing, periodically, which I do. I mean, some people will disagree with me on this, but I do think that testing periodically is okay. Again, just being smart and, what you're doing outside of training and everything else matters too. But doubles and triples, yeah, about 4 weeks out from a meet, it's all strict doubles and triples. I'm not worrying about hypertrophy. I'm not worrying about volume. I've already got that work in. I'm already conditioned. I've already done the strength training. I'm strong enough to handle it. The rest of it from there is just mental and focusing on technique.
Now, how tall are you? Because you looked about as jacked up a 93 dude as I've seen in a long time, and you look like you could do a bodybuilding show.
When I get measured at PT tests and hospital, I'm usually about 69 inches.
So how tall is that?
5 feet 9 inches.
5'9".
Oh, no kidding, it's the same height as me. So do you cut water to make a meet?
I've actually never cut for a powerlifting meet before.
Oh, no kidding. So you just walk around 205-ish?
Yep, I usually walk around about 200 pounds right now.
200 pounds. So do you
each year goes up a little bit just because I'm still growing.
Yeah.
My freshman year of college, I would walk around at about 185 pounds. My sophomore year, about 192 pounds. This year, about 200 pounds. I'm anticipating next year it'll be a little bit more. And if I want to compete 205s, I'll maybe cut a little bit. But that's not a huge issue because cutting was never particularly an issue for me just because, I was a wrestler for several years. I was a football player. Conditioning and cutting weight or gaining weight has never been an issue. I don't typically do water cuts. I don't do any big cuts like that drastically, so I couldn't really tell too much about that. However, I believe my philosophy, some people like to make big cuts and they do the 24-hour water cuts and everything else, but I think that most of the time adversely affects your performance. I think that it's good to honestly train at least within plus or minus 10 pounds of the body weight that you're going to compete at. Any more or less than that, I think you're starting to compromise and risk your performance, and the risks outweigh the benefits at that point.
So you're right now competing around 200. That means you got room to pack on another 5 pounds of muscle, and you're already pretty strong. So looking ahead at the IPF World Championships, who are some of the guys that you're looking at that you think are going to be your top-end competition? Now, does the U.S. going to send 2 lifters again, do you know?
I'm unsure. They might. If they do, LS will probably be the top pick besides myself.
He's got to be, yeah.
We tied on body weight, actually, at the meet.
Yeah, that's true.
Honestly, my true plan at the meet was to, for that third squat, my 75-pound squat to count. And then for my deadlift, I wouldn't have had to go as hard as I did to try to win the meet, but things panned out the way they did, so I just fire and pulled heavy for the win. I never tried 777 pounds before, so it was interesting.
Yeah. It's like, well, here we go. Here goes nothing, right? Got to pull for that win. There's also a young guy from the Ukraine, and I don't want to butcher his name, but I think he's 21 or 22. He didn't have the greatest worlds, but he's a pretty strong guy. Is there a couple other guys in the world besides LS that you're anticipating is going to be a battle at the World Championships?
There is another guy. His name is Gustav. He's from Sweden. That guy is very strong. He's a monster.
Yeah.
He would be the other guy that I'd be particularly watching. He's a good lifter from Sweden. Blondie, very muscular. He has great musculature. He's very strong. He's very conditioned, I can tell.
Yeah.
He utilizes, it seems like at least, he utilizes a lot of the same training philosophies that I do, just in a different way, but generally the idea is the same.
Do you scout these guys online with Instagram? That's why Instagram, it's like a blessing and a curse. If you post a lot, you get a lot of followers or whatever, you get some notoriety, but you're also giving a lot of content for your competition to know where you're at.
You're also giving out some information.
That's right.
Giving out some intel.
That's right.
Yeah, I do. I do my homework on them. If I post anything, for every post I post, I like to see about 2 to 4 of their posts.
Yeah. See, that's like Kimberly Walford. She said she'll video, but she'll do a lot of the posts for that training cycle, for that meet, after the competition's already taken place. Or she'll mix it up, so you think you're watching something that you're about to see, when really she's throwing you off her pace, right?
Absolutely. I didn't even post some of my best lifts for my training cycle before World Nationals. I actually never posted.
Well, it helps because then, for instance, in this situation with LS McLain, he didn't know what you were capable of. He's asking himself, like, what do I got to pull to set the bar out of reach for him? And he really doesn't necessarily know. And the fact that you're 20, it makes it harder because your progress is going to be a lot quicker than, for instance, LS, myself, we're in our late 30s. It'd be a lot harder, right? Like, your progress is, like, what are you anticipating? Are you lifting at the Arnold's?
Unfortunately, I won't be able to compete at the Arnold. I'll be at a Baton Death March in New Mexico. I'll be doing a 26-mile lift march at that time. But I will be competing at Collegiate Nationals. I'm collegiate powerlifter too.
Gotcha. Are you doing? They got collegiate worlds too, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
I didn't go. With UTSA, we opted out of it last year. We were, or the year before, I believe. I can't remember. But we were invited to go, but we decided not to go.
So after that, it's going to be the IPF World Championships that you're targeting?
That is the current plan, yes. The only way I can see that changing in the foreseeable future is if I'm going to be in, because I'm also an Army cadet at UTSA. If I'm in Fort Knox for advanced cadet training during the summer, which is a commission requirement, or if I'm at any other training for the Army during that time. But if I'm not, then I'm more than happy to go out.
And they don't want it. Would they let you have like a leave for a few days? Because that's good propaganda if you got a guy who becomes a world champion and he's in the Army, right? Or do you think could you like apply for that, or?
Potentially. What I could do is I can give them the date of when the competition is set, and I can try to actually schedule the training after the event. It's possible.
Yeah.
It just depends. It depends on a lot of variables, but it's definitely doable. It's possible.
So you're a student and you're in the Army, and is that your job, being in the Army?
I'm a cadet at UTSA, so I'm aspiring to commission as an officer into the Army. So I'm currently a cadet. I'm currently a full-time student. I'm a contracted cadet, so technically you're on reserve. You're kind of like a reserve status. It's kind of a weird iffy thing, but I just for now go by the nomenclature cadet, and then once college is over, then I would be an officer in the Army. But right now the plan is to try to prolong this whole reserve thing and try to get my education up to either a PhD or a PsyD, a doctor of philosophy, or a doctor of psychology, either clinical psychology or counseling psychology.
Holy smokes, man. So you got brains and bronx. So do you have much free time at all, or are you just constantly grinding?
I am constantly grinding, but I do, I'm not good at everything, of course, I do need help sometimes, and, especially in ROTC, I do sometimes by myself or my supporters, we depend on each other to, of course, get things done. In training, it's good to have that training partner, Christian, there to push me. He's a very strong lifter. He's very, very strong. I think he's going to be one of the strongest 105s in the world in the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. But it's good to have all that it's good to have all that support, and also but I do pride myself in having an ability to manage time. Like I was saying before, I'm not great at everything, but I do have a good capacity to manage time. So I do make free time. And if there's no free time, then I make free time.
That's
and,
it. So what,
I figure it out.
when you started weightlifting, how did you get into weightlifting? Weightlifting at 13 is pretty young, right? Did you have like a dad or an older brother weightlifted? And then how did you transition into powerlifting at 15?
Well, I was living in Seoul, Korea when I was 13 years old, Seoul, South Korea. My dad was enlisted in the army. So he was enlisted for 21 years.
Holy smokes.
So what I did was I was in martial arts originally. I was in Taekwondo, practicing. I got really good at it because Korea is the birthplace of Taekwondo.
Yeah, that's right.
And I decided to sign up for football freshman year of high school. So 8th grade, they start you out, start conditioning you and lifting, and then I played football for a couple of years.
And this is over in Korea?
Yes, this was in Korea. And then my sophomore year of high school, I moved to Alaska. I would go back to Korea in the summers and lift with my best friend. But during the school year, my sophomore year, I was in Alaska. I played football there as well. I lifted there. And that school was actually big. We were a big lifting school. Nobody competed in powerlifting, but we were all big lifters. Some of the strongest high school kids I've ever seen in my life from that school.
I believe you.
We had big things like a 300-pound bench club, a 500-pound squat.
Wow, in high school? What the hell kind of high school is this? There's a 500-pound squat club. It would be, if that was my high school, there'd be like one dude.
Well, it's up north, right? What else you got to do?
That's right.
I mean, I grew up north, so really, you don't got much to do in the winter.
It'd be an exclusive club in most high schools.
Exactly. We had some, my school, we had some strong dudes back when I was in high school over there. And it was fun. We all had a good time. We all lifted together. And I wrestled also for those 2 years, my sophomore year of high school. And so my sophomore year of high school, after wrestling season, one of the wrestling coaches came up to me. He was like, hey, man, you're really strong. You should try out this whole powerlifting thing. There's a meet coming up, state meet in Alaska. And that was my first meet back in 2013, April. It was an Alaska State Championship where I did my first American record, 540-pound deadlift. I was 16 years old. I had just turned 16 a couple months ago.
Wow,
I was about
man.
60-something pounds.
Yeah, wow.
So, yeah, that was my first meet.
And then so how did you get from Alaska to Texas? Which is, I would think, a pretty big shock in terms of different. You've been all over the place.
Oh, absolutely. My dad was in this for so long, so we moved around so much. But my dad was then retired by the Army, so we had moved to San Antonio, Texas. And this is where he was retired. And once we got here from Alaska, I met Gene Bell. Gene Bell was a prominent IPF lifter back in the 80s and the 90s.
And his son, is that Ian Bell's father?
I'm sorry?
Is that Ian Bell's father? Or am I wrong?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're a powerlifting family, because Ian Bell's a phenomenal lifter himself.
Yes, he's also a very phenomenal lifter.
He's 93 kilo as well, isn't he? I believe he's 93 kilo equipped, right?
He's usually 93 or 105, though. Right now, I think he usually competes 93, sir. Most of the time, as far as I know, he competes 93. Ian Bell is a very good lifter. His father was too. His father squatted 848 pounds at 181 pounds single ply back in 1988 Hawaii record breakers.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. So, do you guys all train together a lot like a team?
We did, especially when I first moved here, and then Ian, of course, was in Austin for college. Hey, man. Ian was in college in Austin, and then he went to graduate school in Austin as well. I think he's still in graduate school now, probably going to graduate soon. His father's still here in San Antonio, so he'll come out to the gym I'm at sometimes, and we'll all be training there. Bell Power Systems is what it's called. Just members. Kimberly Walford's actually a Bell Power Systems member as well.
Oh, do you train with Kimberly Walford too?
Gene Bell did, yes.
Do you train with Kimberly Walford though? Does she train with you?
I've actually never had the privilege of training with her, but I definitely met her at several meets. She's held a lifter as well. Over 550-pound deadlift, I believe that. Body weight.
Yeah, no, she's probably the greatest women's powerlifter of all time, I would say. If not, on the Mount Rushmore for sure. Yeah. So
arguably, yeah. I would also agree with that. She's one of the best for sure.
Yeah, no kidding. So in terms of moving forward, Are you going to be, so the IPF World Championships is probably the end goal, and what do you anticipate you're going to have to hit for a total to win it, do you think? Because it's interesting how, I think going into the last World Championships, a lot of people were expecting, I mean, it was actually, the total's a little less than I would have anticipated. It's one of those crapshoot situations where you can walk in there with certain numbers and then the whole day shifts, especially with the Ukrainian having missed a couple lifts. Do you have any numbers you think are going to seal the deal for you?
I think so, but understanding IPF the way it is, understanding the environment, understanding where I'll be competing at, just being able to account for all the variables, for everything else. It's not a perfect world, but of course, I competed in IPF before. When I was a senior in high school, I won the single-ply World Championship in the 83 kilogram class.
Oh, no, I didn't know that. So this was as a junior equipped?
Yes, sub-junior. I was 17 years old when I did that.
Wowzers, man. So I was going to say, like, for a guy who's 20 years old, you seem pretty calm, cool, and collected and mature for a lifter and got your things all sorted out. Like, when I was 20 years old, I was all over the place. But so walking in there, you seem like a veteran. You'd be hard to battle, right?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. A little bit seasoned. I've been lifting for 7 years now. I'm going 8 years once February 12th hits, which is my 21st birthday. That's the day I started lifting when I was in 8th grade. But numbers to hit, to answer your question.
Yeah, what are you thinking there? Because it's kind of, I know it's a hard question to answer this far out. Especially if LS goes with you, you guys are going to push each other right to the limit all over again.
Absolutely. The biggest thing for me right now would be the bench press. I've always benched around a little bit over 400 pounds since like my senior year of high school, but I had gotten really sick and hurt one time in high school my senior year, so that affected my bench press really bad. But also ROTC, I do so much running and I do so much rucking and other activity that affects your bench press as well too, because it alters your body weight. Your body weight is always subject to change. But what I would predict to take to win, I would predict a 735, 740 squat, 435, 429 to 440 bench press, and 804 to 823 deadlift.
Damn, man. Wowzers. Especially, I mean, with you and if LS goes with you, that is one hell of a 1-2 punch for the American team. You guys are almost, I mean, there's nothing for sure in powerlifting or in sports in general, but it's one of you guys is probably going to bring home, if not 2 medals for the U.S. team. So let's hope that that's the case. Have you ever had a chance to sit down and train with LS, or how close? Do you talk to LS much since then? Because he has nothing but good things to say about you.
I met LS back when I was about 16 years old, 16, 17 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you guys know each other for a long time.
Absolutely. I know LS personally. Met him personally many times. Spoken with many times. He's a very hell of a lifter. Great bench presser.
Yeah.
And he's just very impressive. And especially even at his age, and he's still very young, but even at his age, he's progressing very well. He's a very impressive lifter.
So
he's always shown me, respect. So I've always shown him respect. He's a great guy.
What was he telling you right before you went out there for that last deadlift?
It's all blurry because I was.
Because he was hyping you up, something fierce. And you were getting hyped up, and I was to be a fly on the wall for that conversation, because it worked, obviously.
Yes, it did.
It looked like no one was happier in the house in LS that you got that pull.
What was that, sir?
It looked like no one else was happier in the house than LS when you got that pull too. For some reason, he was like overjoyed when you got that final deadlift.
He did. He seemed very excited.
Yeah. He's like, yes, I lost. So you don't know what he was saying, eh? That's lost in the history.
Yeah.
Yeah, he well, it was I paraphrased, but it was something along the lines of, you can't miss this, you came too far for this, you can't lose this is yours.
Holy smokes, eh?
Yeah.
So I guess if you're in the LS,
he tried to get me to beat him last year. He tried to get me to beat him last year, but I wasn't strong enough then.
Yeah. So it's great. I guess when you're LS though, and you've won like U.S. Nationals, Arnold's, IPF World Championships, he doesn't need to, like, it's kind of like no matter what, even if he stopped now, his resume is already complete. Like he's okay. So it's a lot easier to root for somebody and want the best out of him when he's already done so much. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot easier. Now, saying that, because you're at 20, starting your career, what are some of your long-term 5-year goals, and what do you want to accomplish before you're in LS's shoes, 38 years old, cheering on the next guy to take the torch from you?
That is a good question. Because I like how you kind of paraphrased that last part. Or, I'm not paraphrased. I like how you kind of said that last part because, I truly do believe in that, whether you're the best today or tomorrow or next year, you won't always be the best, and I always believe that somebody better will always come by or come along. That's just how things go. That's human progress. Mm-hmm. We get better. We get stronger. We push harder. So what I would like to do is of course, when I get World Championship, I'd like to break the squat, the deadlift, and the total world records.
Wow, so you just want a clean sweep.
I believe I was 7.5 kilos shy of the unofficial world record actually at World Nationals. If my last squat actually counted, I think that would have been the world record total for the 205, the 93 weight class. But I want to set the bar really high for whoever comes after me, the next young man that's really strong once I hit that age.
And when it all said and done, you're looking back, how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone that, really just in general, not just as a lifter, not just as, a very strong individual, but somebody who was trusted by, many of the people he coached, he taught. Somebody who was respectful, somebody who was well respected, somebody who set a legacy and set a standard of excellence, not just in lifting, but just in really in all walks of life. And of course, also as a good leader in the U.S. Army, and just a good leader in general, somebody that others can depend on. That's really all I could ask for.
Well said, my man. Well, listen, thanks for coming on. We'd love to have you back. Possibly leading into the IPF World Championships. Yeah. We'll talk about that. We'll see what the roster looks like. We'll kind of see the nominations and have a chat about that.
Awesome.
Okay, man. Good training.
I'm more than happy to talk.
Sounds good, man. Good training. Good luck on your training for the IPF World Championships, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Sounds good. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.
Humble young man.
How long before he puts on enough muscle to get to the 105s? At 20 years old,
yeah,
by the time he's 25,
he's 5
he's
foot.
going to be huge.
The only thing is, he's 5'9". But I mean, Screamer's like 5'6".
That's what I mean. And
Places,
how fast this guy puts on muscle.
Yeah.
In 5 years, he's going to have a hard time being 93.
At some point, you got to think he's going to slow a little bit.
But that's, even at 25, still, you're 25.
Yeah.
You're just coming into what people normally are, right?
The scary thing is that at 20 years old, and he's putting on muscle as quickly as he is, and he's hitting, he was just off the world record total, so we could be seeing the beginning of a dynasty. Now, powerlifting, it's one of those sports that somebody new comes around out of nowhere, but it's a good story, especially how, the passing of the torch thing, LS had talked about. Before him, obviously, David Ricks was his idol.
Yeah.
Okay, and David Ricks had won all these world championships, and David Ricks was literally at the side watching the platform when LS was going to dethrone him as the American champion to go represent the U.S. on the world stage. And David came down the last deadlift, and David Ricks was like, "Let's go, young man. This is your time."
Yeah.
It's the long lines of the same thing.
Yeah.
Cheering on LS. LS obviously ends up nailing the dead, and we all know LS's story now. He's a world champion.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
it's all coming around.
It's all coming around.
Yeah.
And now LS is passing the torch. LS had said previously when he was on the show, he thought it might be Lane Norton that would be the next guy to pick up the torch. But Lane, obviously, got injured.
Yeah.
He's a little older as well. Now he's late 30s. But this guy, man, Ashton,
at
20 years old. Most guys, at 20 years old, they're just not muscularly developed.
The guy's a 4.0 student, too.
Yeah.
I look back on his Instagram. The guy's got, a president's list. He's not, that's why he's talking about his PhD. And you're just all right, so you got all this with lifting. You got your schooling. Yeah. And then he's talking about those rucksack runs.
Yeah.
Those are 26-mile hikes in a day with your rucksack on, which is 40, 50 pounds in Mexico.
The guy's a freak, man.
I'm trying to hold weight. Yeah, no kidding, you're carrying a 40-pound bag. Of course, you're trying to hold weight. Come on. Wow, but it's crazy how much, and that's what I was going to be how do you keep mentally focused through all of that and throw it into lifting?
This is one of these guys who it seems like he can't fail, man. Everything he tries for it, he excels at.
Like, well, I was wrestling and I was good at that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I bet you some freaking Korean kids got their necks broken, man.
He just didn't talk about his black belt that he got while he was over in Korea too.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's impressive at his age, like how he's very gentlemanly when it comes to speaking and talking. I mean, he called you sir like 42 times. I don't think anyone.
That's a military thing. That's a military thing.
Yeah. But just so respectful in the way his mannerisms are. He's very thought out about before he opens his mouth. He knows what's going to come out.
It's
he doesn't just kind of But no, it's very impressive listening to him talk and kind of where he's at and what his thoughts are. And you don't hear many 20-year-olds talk about a legacy
like that.
in that way, right?
Yeah.
Most of them are like, fuck, I want to break this, I want to do that, like blah blah. This guy's just like, oh, I want to be remembered as a good person.
He'd be a good ambassador, like in terms of interviews and the way he carries himself. He's like very disciplined. Yeah. I mean, I don't picture this guy going out even partying. It sounds like he's grinding 24/7.
Well, he's not even old enough. He's 20.
Oh shit, that's true too.
He can't even go buy beer yet.
Yeah, wowzers. Anyways, I can't wait to see him at the World Championships. Looking at it, I know the Ukrainian who came in fourth, and I'll butcher his name, but he's a Ukrainian champion. He's also 21 years old. He came in fourth at Worlds, but he actually was coming in with the biggest nomination. I believe his nominated total was 840 to 843 range.
Okay.
Now, Ashton got, I think, 840, was it at the USAPL? So they're both like neck and neck. Now, the Ukrainian had a bad day, and that's what happens in sports, period. So literally it's going to come down to, like, we thought this was close. If LS McLain also makes that national team, and you got Ashton, LS, the Ukrainian's back, if he doesn't miss like he did last time, and then whoever else did, the Swedish guy, we're talking like it could be the battle, we had the battle of the 83s between Hack and Gibbs, the battle of the 105s with those four guys last year. It could be the 93s we're all talking about. Yeah. And if he emerges from when everyone's watching, and there's a couple divisions every year that everyone's like, you can't miss this one.
Like the 83s and 105s this year, I'm glued.
Yeah. So if it becomes the 93s, and this guy emerges he'll be 21 years old, he could be the future. Yeah. It's quite
having someone at that, and that's a very, you look at the 93s, right? That's a very average weight for a lot of guys. Yeah. So having someone that young, you'll see a lot of gym guys be like, oh, well, I can, if he does it, of course I can do it. Without realizing, but it'll build the sport even more so, right? It'll bring more people in to that. Yeah.
100%. You identify a guy who's like 5'9", 200 pounds, as opposed to a guy who's like Ray Williams. Seeing him on TV, you'd be like, he's just a freak. I'm never going to be that.
Yeah.
Very well
like
said.
I don't got a 125 heavyweight in me to be 440.
There's no way
squat.
It just
over
seems
1,000 pounds.
These are titans walking.
Yeah, exactly.
It's unrealistic for them.
It's still amazing to watch, but I'm 6'4", 240. I can't relate to that.
Yeah.
Unracking 5 plates and unracking 10 plates is quite the hell of a difference.
Unracking 10 plates is ridiculous. Yeah. But anyways, good episode. Next we got the Deadlift Panda. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Talk to you next time. Okay, so I wasn't half bad considering we started off kind of.